Hi there, how's it going? So today we're going to talk about improvisation. In other words, how we can think on the move, how we react and work on the fly without any real sort of pre-planning going on. Of course, when it comes to martial arts, like any other activity, there are different approaches to teaching. I guess with martial arts, we tend to broadly separate them into three categories: traditional, sports, and self-defense combatives. And of course, I know there's going to be overlap in this area, but I'm painting in fairly broad strokes here to start. What we're going to look at today is the Systema approach to improvisation and how we can learn to become adaptable and not get too fixed in our movement patterns, too fixed in our thoughts and responses. Of course, as I always say, this is a very big topic. It gets us into all sorts of different areas, so I'm going to keep things fairly brief and general today, though I'm going to give you a couple of practical tips. And as I always say, if you want to see more in-depth instructional content, click the join button below. That tells you how you can access our member channel. I think there's 90, close on 100 instructional uploads there now on all sorts of subjects, and there's access to Zoom sessions and other stuff going on as well. So I'm going to explain a little bit about the theory behind this first, and then we'll get outside and I'll show you how this theory works in practice. This kind of principle is universal across whatever it is you're doing, whether it's learning a language, learning a musical instrument, learning martial arts, and so on and so on. If we look at music, we can think of two main approaches. There's what we might call the classical approach, and there's what we might call the freestyle or jazz approach. Now, if we look at classical music, and an orchestra in particular, we have a conductor, and part of the conductor's job is to keep everyone in time. So the first thing we look at is rhythm. So the conductor, and everyone's in time and everyone's on the beat. If it comes to other types of music, like I played in a lot of reggae bands, right? There's no conductor is the first thing. So what I have to do as part of that band is hear the beat, which I usually take from the bass drum, boom, boom, and maybe a bit off the bass guitar as well. And then it's my job not necessarily to follow those, because if everything is played on the beat, it's got no swing, right? That's not reggae or jazz or blues or whatever it is you're doing. So you have to learn to play a little bit off the beat, and then you find where these gaps are between the beats as well. So this is how you get that nice mix, and as I said earlier, what we call the groove. That's what gives the music this interest, rather than it just being like a marching song, I guess. That's the sort of concept we're looking at when it comes to our work with another person. And what we tend to find with a technique approach, there's a certain rhythm, right? You can see this in kata practice or form practice, and you certainly see this in kung fu movies, a lot of the old fight movies. Ha, 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 ha. There's a very particular rhythm. The issue with that, or at least my issue with that, is what we try and then do is fit the actual event, what is happening, to our technique. So I'm trying to fit this other person and their actions into my rhythm. Now with the Systema approach, it's kind of the opposite. We're a bit more in that sort of reggae vibe, if I can put it like that, is I'm more working, I feel that other person's rhythm and I work inside of that, and I fill the gaps. And once I filled one gap, then I fill another gap, and so on and so on and so on. So this is like in music, rather than having it all written out for me, like in an orchestra, I'm going by feel, I'm going by experience and practice, of course, and having an understanding of what the situation requires. So this is why one of the major differences we see with Systema and, say, the traditional approach, and even the sports approach to some extent, is we don't really work any set patterns. There's no forms or kata, and it's rare you have a sort of session where we'll stand and we'll repeat one technique over and over and over again. Now, that's not to say we don't look at movement and refine it, and occasionally we'll look at technical work, particularly when it comes to applying locks. So we can add that element in, but that's not the core of our practice. The core of our practice is this work on being adaptable and being able to improvise. Now, in order to do that, we've got to have some attributes, right? We've got to have some attributes and things in place. We've got to be able to move well. We've got to be able to maintain our posture. We've got to understand how the body works in terms of biomechanics, in terms of how to absorb power, how to deliver power, and of course we've got to have an understanding of psychology, our psychology and that of the other person as well. And as you can probably guess, the first step to psychological training is breath work. So you're not learning a pattern like, I'm going to block here, then I'm going to strike there, then I'm going to grab, pull onto the knee, hit with the elbow kind of thing. Instead, well, I'll show you. So Matt's helping me out today, and going to keep things very simple, very basic. We're going to work with the knife because it's very easy to see. We're just working big movements. Say this is really to give you some practical ideas, and of course you go away and you develop these and you add in all your different layers. So Matt is going to stab me in the stomach, and thank you. What I'm going to do first of all is some sort of technique. So I'm maybe going to do a move like, I'm going to deflect the knife down here, I'm going to grab his wrist, come up into the elbow, then across the face and maybe into some sort of takedown. So if you go here, grab, here and down. Once again, here, here and here. So I can put that out as a technique, you know, nice little short video, put a guitar riff on it kind of thing. Some people say, oh, that looks like a good technique. Some people are going to say that will never work. Some people will do the technique incorrectly just to prove it doesn't work. That's it, and that's quite a standard. What I've just done there is like martial arts, right? I'm in a nice pose at the end. That's the important thing. But here's the problem. If we go back to that idea of music again, and the conductor, and who is setting the beat, well, it's me. I've told Matt what to do. I've told Matt where he's going to do it, and also pretty much tell him when to do it. He's not going to do it now, right? So that's good, but this is not how things work in real life. He's working to his own beat and his own rhythm. So it could potentially, anything can happen at any time. This is where we get to this idea again of what have I got that I can control. And as we've said, very little. I can control myself to some extent. That's pretty much it. So rather than have this preset idea of what I'm going to do, I've got to work on the fly. And the first thing is, if he's coming in with the knife, I don't want the knife to touch me. So the first thing I'm going to do is move out of the way. So what I suggest you do, or one approach for this, because there's a few different ways we can approach this, is this idea of breaking this situation down in musical terms into bars, into notes. Just like if you're learning a piece of music, you don't practice the whole thing all the way through every time. So what we're going to break down first is when that comes in, I want to move out the way. Now already I'm giving myself choices and options. If I move here, then I've moved out of the way, but I've not solved the problem, which is of him keep coming forward. I'm not in a position to do anything. If we're in this range, it's not likely that I can turn and run and get away, it's too close. So my first thing is I move out of the way. Having moved out of the way in the training situation, I now think, right, what sort of things can I do next? If we go into our sport and combative sort of mode, then what a lot of people seem to like to do is tie this arm up. You've got to get control of the knife, control the knife, control the knife. So they'll do this kind of thing. So this is all right, but now I've got to think from this position, what can happen from here? What can I do? But more importantly, what can he do? I've got both my hands tied up, he's got a hand free. Basic maths, okay? What you sometimes see from here is people want to headbutt and then they come in with the knee, neither of which feels particularly good for me. If I'm going to knee him, I'm going to use this leg into his side. So if I'm going to do this kind of work, my other option here is going to be to drop him straight down that way. If I decide to do that, whatever I decide to do, I've got to do that quick because I've got to change his rhythm. I've got to interrupt his rhythm. If we get into this exchange idea, then I come here, he punches, you know, and now if he's a strong guy, even if I hold on quite tight here, if he just starts pulling me around a little, you know, there's not a lot I can do about it. So this is what I also said before about this idea with the rhythm. I'm looking for the space. With your classical, everything follows the beat. I'm looking for the space in between the beat. There's, if you go like 1 and slash back, for example, 1, 2, okay? So I can follow that, 1, 2. Then I can go into my whatever. If I do this instead, I'm interrupting, I'm filling that, there's that one beat, there's me filling the space, this second beat is not possible, you know, because I'm interrupting his flow, I'm interrupting his pattern of movement, whatever you want to call it. So that's stage one. Whatever the threat is, I don't want it to land, whether it's a fist or a foot or a knife. Stage one, I get out of the way. Ideally, I get out of the way in such a position that I can straight away do something to him. As far as controlling the knife here goes, if my hands are up here, I'm probably going to control by coming down this way. Here, I can grab my own jacket or whatever. Now, if he tries to pull back or bend this arm, not only have I got pretty good control of that, I go with it, but I've also got a hand free. And of course, this could be hitting here, it might be hitting here, I might be using the knee. If I want to attack the elbow here, the nice thing is I don't have to use this arm at all. I just extend out, I just open the chest. So this is where we start to see, I talked before about attributes, that idea of movement. The wave movement, for example, if the body is relaxed and fluid, I can actually damage the elbow just from the body movement. So I've got my first position, I've moved out of the way, simultaneously I'm hitting here because I want to interrupt the beat, his flow, I want to fill that gap. I'm already attacking the elbow. Here I can drop the elbow down, I can sweep that front foot out, whatever. That all develops. But the other thing is, while I'm doing that, Matt is not particularly doing anything back. Okay, that's all right at the first stage, but now we can start building in. For example, I'm going to not quite trap his arm properly, and Matt is going to continue his movement. So if I come here now, right, all right. So that's the next thing I need to address. What if I don't quite catch this arm properly? Now I've got to be sensitive enough. Let's say I hit him here, and even hitting him here may bring that hand across, right, just by virtue of pushing him back. Then I've got to be sensitive and adaptable enough to follow that down and still come through. Again, I'm trying to avoid contact with the blade. Now, to do this, you can do lots of kind of sensitivity exercises. Just keep like slashing, you know, we can work on this kind of stuff. So you'll see this in lots of different arts, just working backwards and forwards. But there's no time in that type of practice to make a stance, to get into your technique. So there's tons of exercises we can do to develop that sensitivity, that body awareness, from having the knife pushing against the body, for example, to working from a distance, all these kind of flow drills. That's another way you start to develop this skill to improvise and work on the fly. And now one more thing, because if I've let the guy approach here and I think he's got a knife in his hand, then things have already gone wrong for me. But this could happen if we're in a crowd or I'm distracted or something like that, you know, he could be there. Ideally, as he's coming in, I'm already interrupting his beat, his pattern. You know, the typical thing for the knife would be a kick to the knee or something like that. We've had two guys use this over the past few years, both involved in knife situations. Both went for the knee and one followed up with a hit to the face, problem solved. So, again, it's getting away from this martial arts idea of I have to wait for him to attack, then I do my movements, but also this idea of, right, if someone's going to attack me, it is already there, you know. I'm just responding through doing all this sort of training, so if someone approaches, I'm already moving. Even if he's here, even if I'm not preempting, I'm positioning myself in such a way to make it more difficult for him to attack me. as soon as he starts moving, or even before he's moving, I'm already moving. Okay? Because although I have to fit in with his rhythm, it doesn't mean that I have to continue with it. Otherwise we get into that tennis match. You know, if you close your eyes and listen to a tennis match, what do you get? Bop, 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 bop. What I said before about the Kung Fu films, right? Heh, 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 heh. There's that rhythm. We kind of get lulled into that when we're doing something, training with a partner. We kind of like that. We enjoy that. Everyone knows what's going on. I had one of our chaps sparred with an MMA guy recently. Friendly thing, you know. It was a good session. But he said one thing he didn't like was he kept closing right into the guy, and the guy kept saying, "Can you back up a bit because I can't work my punches in from that range." Well, good. That's why you're getting close. You know, when it comes to improvisation, you do have not so much a plan, but you have an idea of how to move. You have an idea that if I've got that arm extended, I can do that to hyperextend. You know, where if I hit the guy in the back of the neck, that's going to have more effect than if I hit him here, for example. All these little things you come to acquire through your practice, and then of course you need to put these to the test. You start with slow sparring, you can build up, you can go into scenarios, testing work, all that kind of thing. But the important thing always is not so much to have a plan, but always to be prepared. So there we go. I hope that explains a little bit in practical terms how this theory works. I mean, it's like anything, especially in Systema, you know, it's simple, but it's not necessarily easy. What appears simple on the surface, you know, might just look like a couple of people mucking about sometimes. We've had that comment before, right? Actually, there's layers and layers to that work. And in my experience, I mean, I spent sort of 20 years or so training prior to Systema, and I was always looking for something that would fit into my real life experiences, which back in the day, let's just say fights could be chaotic, right? It wasn't like one guy faces off with another and they do this kind of thing. It was usually groups or crowds or whatever. Total chaos, really. And Systema was the first time when I saw the Mass Attack tape, the first time that I saw any martial art that looked as though it would work in that environment. And the reason it does is because of this ability to adapt and work on the fly, which comes through working a principle approach rather than thinking of specific technique. So of course you still have to train that the right way. It's not a magic thing where you do this for a couple of weeks and boom, suddenly you're going to be untouchable. Like anything, you have to put in work, you have to develop it. But what happens over a period of time is, it's like anything. If you're first thrown in the water, right, you haven't got a clue what to do. You kind of flail around. The more experience you get, the more you understand, oh, if I do this, I can stay afloat. If I move my body this way, I can actually move through the water. So it's the same thing, because although there can be a huge amount of different situations, there are one or two things that are constant. One is that our bodies all work the same way. You know, elbows go so far, shoulders work a particular way. Everyone's the same in that regard. The other constant is you. In any situation, you are the constant. So if you know how to control yourself and you understand that aspect of yourself, then that is one constant you can work from. It gives you a solid base to work from. Outside of that, you have control over, well, nothing really. So accepting that means that when it happens, it's less of a shock. If you think you're always going to be in control and you're very confident in what you do, great. I'm not saying it never works out, because it can do. I've seen it, I've experienced that. But when things go slightly wrong, there's a very big kind of drop-off in skills, I find. So in order to guard against that, you need to know how to adapt. So my suggestion is, for Systema or anything else, well, Systema, you're already doing this anyway, break your training down. Like I said, think of individual bars, individual notes. Think of 1 second. Set up a situation and just examine 1 second of it. When that fist comes into here, let's look at that bit. Then you can bring it back and you can gradually expand that out and fit all these seconds together and work into your scenarios, your sparring and your testing work. And one last thing, I'll just leave you with this little story. which illustrates the importance of awareness as well, because that's something I've not spoken about, but you know, I've spoken enough already. So I had a friend who was a drummer and a percussionist, and he got a gig with an orchestra, and he was playing the big cymbals, you know, and it's quite a long piece, and at some point it builds to a dramatic crescendo, and my friend, boom, that was his job. As I said, this was quite a long piece, so his thing was on page 26, and of course he's very focused at the start. He's following the score, page 8, page 10, page 12, and of course the attention starts wandering, and he suddenly looks up and the conductor is glaring at him, and of course he's missed it. So, you know, sometimes you might just have a small thing to do, but if the awareness is not there, if you're not switched on, you can miss your opportunity. Anyway, that's another subject, maybe something we'll look into next time. That's it for now. If you like this stuff, then please do hit the like, share and subscribe buttons and all that kind of thing. And remember to click that join button for details on accessing our member content. Take care.